Welcome back to Thimbleberry U. I am John Gay, joined again by Amy Wallace from Thimbleberry Financial. Always good to be with you, Amy.
Jag, I love having these conversations with you.
And we're going to expand on something we've talked about in previous episodes today. I know you have a lot of clients that have employee stock plans. So we're going to really kind of dive into that today, really get into 5 questions, and we'll handle these one at a time. But these are the 5 questions we're going to focus on today. Should I hold on to the company stock? I know what's going on in my company. Our stock's going to go sky high. It'd be crazy to sell it. Why should I sell my stock if it's doing well? When I log into my account, it says I have more than you say I do, and why is that? And finally, our 5th question, shouldn't I always put as much as I can into my ESPP, Employee Stock Purchase Plan, if I get a discount? So we'll start with the first question here, Amy, and that is, should people hold on to their employer stock?
Well, it's going to depend on the situation. And when I say it depends, what I'm considering there is, what does the foundation of their financial plan look like? So foundation is their cash reserves, their protection planning, making sure that their shorter term goals are met. What does risk look like for the person? And where are they in terms of being on track for goals? Mm-hmm. So, for example, I was recently talking with a client whose company had gone public not too long ago, and he is diversifying away from that company. Mm-hmm. He shared that he's feeling a little blue, that he's watching some employees retire, and he's happy for them, but he also just wanted to make sure he's absolutely doing the right thing with the stock. It makes sense that somebody would wonder that. But his primary goal with the money, and thus our strategy, was to use this money to secure his family's future. Mm-hmm. He felt like this was a big gift, and he wanted to make sure that the family was secure in case he didn't have this kind of income coming in the future, or assets like this, and that healthcare costs could be covered, and college for his daughter. And so we needed to remove risk by being heavily concentrated. If, however, somebody's financially independent and has a lot of stock, they can afford to lose that money. Or if they're willing to, then a different strategy than the one I just described might make sense. So again, it depends.
But it always depends, Amy.
It does. We sound like lawyers.
Well, Your Honor. Diversification is so important, and I feel like we've talked about this in many of our previous episodes, that if this is to secure your financial future, you don't want to put all your eggs in the proverbial basket. So if this is, for lack of a better way of putting it, if this is play money, and like you said, if you can afford to lose the money and you think this stock is going to go well, then sure. But if security is your goal, then diversification is certainly important.
Absolutely. It all comes down to goals.
So our second question today, Amy, we're going to dive into is, do employees know what's happening in their companies and what that means for the stock price?
I love this question. And unfortunately, despite their best intentions, employees don't know. Unless you're truly in the inner circle, really high up, there's just too much to know. Most employees will acknowledge, I think, that they don't know the inner workings of the company they work for.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when it comes to stock and future performance of that stock, they think they're the exception and that they do know. And it makes sense. It's a familiarity bias. Mm-hmm. It's a perfect example of that. What that bias really means is that it's more important that these folks rely heavily on an unbiased professional to help them make their decisions related to that employer's stock.
Like you said, that familiarity bias that, I know what's going on here, and I think that this is going to happen, so I'm just going to sit and wait for my payday to come or whatever it ends up being. And there may be a lot of factors you don't know. You're not sitting in the C-level suite in most cases for the decisions that are being made for the company going forward. And, because you work there and you know more than somebody who doesn't work for the company, you may think that you know more than you actually do. It's just basic psychology.
Yep. Human nature. There's nothing wrong with it. We just have to recognize it.
Right. So somewhat of an offshoot of that, one of the similar questions would be, why should an employee sell company stock when it is doing well?
Is it enough to answer this with 2020?
All right, next question. No, I'm kidding.
Okay. So I think, 2020 is a year of the murder hornets and COVID and being here in Oregon, fires and smoke.
Yeah.
And it's the year of the unexpected and the unusual. So I'm going to go off topic for a second. And we know that lots of people are currently unemployed due to COVID.
Sure.
Many, whether they're unemployed or not, would have prepared for life differently for COVID and after COVID had they had the opportunity. Jag, would you agree with that?
I think that I would have probably saved more in 2019 if I knew what was ahead in 2020. That's a very fair statement.
Okay, great. But the reality is people had the opportunity to prepare in different ways than they did, and they didn't. So what I mean by that is we didn't know it's coming, but I think generally people have heard build a cash reserve equal to 3 to 6 months of your expenses.
Right.
That'll help you prepare financially for the unexpected. We are in the unexpected. When I say that, I know that there's lots of people living paycheck to paycheck, and it's much harder to build a reserve. I absolutely acknowledge that.
Sure.
But for those that have the resources and, we could have gone out and bought these toys versus saving, or we could have saved instead of buying these toys, I should have said, they might have prepared differently.
I'm going to have to introduce you to my wife because she would like you a lot. She has broken
I think
me
I'd
of,
like her too.
She has broken me of so many of these bad habits since we've moved in together.
So when I say that, going back to the idea of selling stock when it's doing well, risks and opportunities both abound in the ownership of stock. And we have to look at those in depth. One issue is the concentration we already talked about. There's the concentration of owning stock with one company, but then also working for that company. That's a form of concentration too. So why you should sell it is to be prepared. Should you sell all of it? Should you hold on to some? It's all going to depend on someone's financial situation and their goals.
Again, it depends. But as we mentioned earlier, this is diversification. If you're talking about your investments and your paycheck coming from the same source and the same company, that's the polar opposite of diversification. So I can see where you're coming from there.
You're making me think that we should change the title of this episode to It Depends.
But really, when it comes to financial planning, that could be the title of any episode, right, Amy?
Fair enough.
All right, so our fourth question we wanted to get into today is for an employee says, when I log in to see my company stock, it says I have lots more than you say I do. Explain that.
Yeah. So this comes up frequently with prospective clients and every once in a while with our clients. And it really relates to equity compensation in the form of RSUs and stock options.
Okay.
And, we have podcasts on those, so I won't get into the details here. But employers want you to know the value of the benefits they're giving you, your stock benefits. They really want you to know what that money looks like. Well, RSUs, restricted stock units, and stock options both have vesting dates. And most of the platforms I've seen for employees that reflect those benefits include the value of unvested shares. The problem is that the unvested shares don't actually belong to the employee.
Okay.
They aren't the employee's money, and they won't be until the employee has worked for the firm long enough for them to vest. Therefore, those unvested shares technically do not have any value today. They have value in the future when they vest. So it's misleading when you log in to see that you have $50,000 more than you do because those shares have not yet vested.
So you're almost looking at what you potentially have versus what you actually have.
It's a combination of those two things. So when we're doing planning, we account for them as future cash flow and an asset coming in the future, but we are not going to count them as an asset that someone has today.
That is a really important distinction. And as you mentioned, Amy, we've done an entire podcast episode on RSUs. If you want to know more about that, definitely go back and listen to that episode of Thimbleberry U. All right, so the final question today is another topic we've done a podcast on, really, which is, shouldn't I always put as much money as I can into my ESPP if I get a discount? What would you say to that?
I'm going to say go listen to that podcast.
Right.
So, and actually, this is funny because my answer here again is...
It depends.
It depends?
Yep.
So generally, I really like those ESPP plans, employee stock purchase plans that do include a discount. But there are times that it doesn't make sense to participate. If you don't have a big enough cash cushion to fall back on, then the ESPP might be a little bit dangerous for you. Another one is if you're going to really be emotionally tied to that stock and really struggle to fight the familiarity bias that we talked about earlier and really not sell ESPP stock because with a discount, I really look at it as free money, then that might hurt you more than help you.
So 2 reasons not to dive too far into that are if you think you're going to be too emotionally attached, or also if you're taking money from a place where you're going to need to have that liquidity or that cash on hand, you don't want to take away, like, for example, if you have that savings for in case of emergency, you don't want to risk everything else to dump it into that stock plan, because then again, it goes back to the all the eggs in one basket thing.
Exactly. Well, and it's just having that cushion, right? A foundation of a financial plan, which I don't think we've done an episode on and probably need to. So let's look for that coming up soon, is that you need to have cash reserves and you need to have dealt with your protection planning and your liabilities. So that cash gives you money for emergencies and opportunities. And some ESPP plans are 3 months long. That's not as big of a risk. But if it's a year long or 2 years long, there's a much bigger risk to putting much of your income into that if you don't have that cushion.
So, Amy, I know you deal with these types of questions on a daily basis. You have a real niche in that tech sector, both there in Portland and anywhere that somebody's listening to this right now. You deal with clients all over. If somebody wants to reach you at Thimbleberry Financial, what are the best ways to find you?
Since we're talking about tech, I will say our website's probably the best way at thimbleberryfinancial.com. But if someone has some questions and just wants to chat with us, they can give us a call too at 503-610-6510.
And again, this is why I need to speak to a professional, because as we've mentioned several times, say it with me, Amy, it depends. Take care, Amy, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Jag.
Registered representative, securities offered through Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisor representative, Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Thimbleberry Financial are not affiliated.